This is the new Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K. And although it looks the same as their pocket cameras, looks can be deceiving. This is a very different camera. It's the next big step for Blackmagic. Not only is it their first ever full-frame camera, it's also the first time we're seeing them adopt one of the new mirrorless mount options. I think it would be easy to gloss over this launch because it looks so physically similar to their previous cameras, but I really think that would be missing the point here. This is now the most affordable full-frame cinema camera that we currently sell. There are mirrorless hybrid cameras that are slightly cheaper, like Panasonic's S5 Mark II X or Sony's A7 Mark IV, for example. But this has those mini XLR connections on the body itself. It has false color, a big screen on the back, and of course it has Blackmagic 6K RAW internally. There's a huge amount of value for money here, and that is what this camera is really about. So let's take a look at this sensor. It's a 36 by 24mm full frame CMOS sensor with a dual native ISO of 400 and 3200. Blackmagic say it has 13 stops of dynamic range, which is also what they say the Pocket 6K Pro has as well. But we're going to be doing a bit of a deeper dive into the actual image quality and running some tests to put it directly against the Pocket 6K Pro in a future video, so make sure you're subscribed to see that one. At full frame, you can record the sensor in open gate 3x2 or anamorphic 6x5 up to 36 frames a second. 6K DCI up to 48 or 6K wide 2.4:1 up to 60. Crop into Super 35 and you can do 4K DCI up to 60p or HD up to 120 if you crop right into Super 16. So the frame rates aren't really going to be enough to get most people excited, but you do get that little bit of slow motion in every record format. One thing to note though is that there's no ProRes anymore. This is a Blackmagic RAW only camera. Technically there's an MP4 proxy option, but that's very compressed 8-bit footage and it actually only records it alongside your B-RAW clips. So Blackmagic RAW only. But that could be no bad thing. B-RAW is fantastic quality, it's really easy to work with in post once you're in Resolve, and it gives you lots of options for scaling it down to make it pretty usable on any project. In 12:1 quality, you can actually get that 6K DCI RAW down to about 600 megabits a second, which is kind of what an all-eye codec would normally be. The other big change here is that this camera has an optical low-pass filter, something that has been missing from the Pocket cameras. This is a big deal, especially for larger productions. Essentially, an optical low-pass filter gets rid of those awful moire and aliasing artifacts, which are a huge problem. Once they're in your footage, they can be in it forever. There's not really that much that can be done. It does normally cost a little bit of a trade-off in sharpness. However, the images still look very rich and detailed to me. Again, we're going to test sharpness properly in a future video. The most obvious physical change that Blackmagic have made with this camera is swapping out the EF mount from the Pocket 6K for Panasonic's L mount. This has made the whole front of the camera much more compact, which is very welcome indeed. And of course opens up a whole world of lens options via adapters. Which mirrorless lens mount Blackmagic were going to actually choose has been a discussion amongst customers for a long time now. Will they go Sony E mount or Canon RF mount perhaps? But I do think L mount is a sensible choice for them. There's a huge amount of fantastic third-party lenses out there for it. And there are some really good all-purpose zooms natively from both Panasonic and Sigma, like this Lumix 24-70 f2.8 for example. But most modern cinema lenses are also being launched now with interchangeable mounts on the back, and L mount is just as common here as RF or E mount is. This move to L mount though is probably why this camera has no internal ND filters while the Pocket 6K Pro does. The smaller flange distance and smaller lens turret on the front mean it is much more challenging and much more expensive to fit an ND system in there. So we just don't have one. There are so many good solutions though now for adding ND afterwards, like this Tilta Mirage matte box, which has an optional variable ND filter built into it. That's quite a cost-effective option, but it's not as convenient as actually having them built into the camera itself. In fact, the physical design overall is probably the piece of negative feedback I've heard the most from customers since this camera was announced. And I admit, I also would have liked to have seen a new body design. Don't get me wrong, there's things I really like about this design, especially this articulating high bright screen and the simple function buttons on the top for quick access to your monitoring tools. However, the design as a whole just doesn't really feel very modern anymore, perhaps a bit chunky. I would have loved to have seen a redesign, and I'm sure many of you would agree with me. However, we do have to remember that this is a large part of why the cameras cost what they do. And would I trade it for the other innovations that Blackmagic have done recently, like B-RAW for example? No, I probably wouldn't. So, no physical redesign, but let's run through what we do have as a reminder. We do have that large 5-inch 1400 nit LCD screen on the back, which is fantastic to use. It articulates away from the body like this, but it won't flip out to one side. We have 2 mini XLR ports built actually onto the body itself, and of course a 3.5mm jack for audio as well. We have a full-size HDMI, a locking DC power input, and a USB-C port, which can be used to record everything the camera can do over to SSDs. Now though, we only have one card slot, but it is a CF Express Type B, and I am very pleased about that. CF Express is a much better card format than CFast 2 or SD like we had on the Pockets. It's much more reliable and much faster. And the cost has come down massively recently thanks to cards like the Angelbird SE range. Having only one slot is a shame, of course, but for the kinds of work that we find this camera being used on, we do find having 2 slots for redundancy is less critical to most customers than it is on a mirrorless camera, which are used for, events or documentary work. And actually, even on the Pocket cameras, which do have those 2 card slots, you can't actually dual record to them both at once for redundancy. So when you think about it, there's kind of no difference here between only having one physical slot and there having 2. We also get the same accessories overall, which the 6K Pro uses. So the same battery grip for the bottom and the same EVF for the top. I'm a big fan of this EVF. It's a must-have for shooting handheld or outside, in my opinion, and almost just a must-have accessory overall for the camera. It also uses the same NPF batteries as the Pocket 6K Pro, which is nice. We're going to have a battery test in our next video to see how long they actually last. So, what do I think of the Cinema Camera 6K? Well, to be honest, I think it is all about that price. Is this the best cinema camera that we sell? No, of course it's not. I don't think even Blackmagic themselves would claim that it is. But it does offer some fantastic value for money for its price point. If you need an affordable cinema camera, this has got to be something you look into. I mean, it's half the price of a Canon R5C or a FX6 or a Kinefinity Mavo, for example. And that's hard to ignore. This is gonna get the job done for a lot of people and produce some fantastic looking work along the way. It might look the same physically as their other Pocket cameras, but I definitely don't think that this is a camera which people should underestimate. But what do you think of the new Cinema Camera 6K? Let me know in the comments section, and if you want to buy one for yourself, of course, head over to proev.co.uk. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.